Hello, I'm Ed Gallagher, President of the American-Scandinavian Foundation, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Scandinavia House, the Nordic Center in America. The ASF was founded 100 years ago, and one of its first acts was to sponsor an exhibition of contemporary Scandinavian art. Over 150 works were included in that exhibition by some of the leading artists of the time, including Munch, Larsen, Hammershøi, Zorn, and many others. We were inspired to recall that exhibition. We invited Patricia Berman to organize a group of curators and scholars from Scandinavia and the US, and the result is a very exciting look at Scandinavian modernism, a particularly rich period in the history of art.
Hi, my name is Pat Berman, and I'm a professor of art history at Wellesley College in Massachusetts, and also at the University of Oslo in Norway. As Edward Gallagher just told you, this exhibition looks back 100 years at the first exhibition organized by the American-Scandinavian Foundation, which was the first exhibition of pan-Scandinavian art in the United States. When the Scandinavian artists' works were shown here in New York, they represented precisely the kind of crystallized desires of so many critics and artists to see something that was seen as genuine, seen as authentic, and seen to be about regional placemaking by advanced artists. There's so many paintings I'd like to be able to show you from this exhibition, but for now what I'd like to do is highlight a few works that seem to encapsulate much of what America desired and admired of Nordic art at the turn of the century and that we admire today as we visit this exhibition. The first painting I'd like to introduce is by Akseli Gallen-Kallela, which is a portrait of his new wife. It's actually a portrait of her on their honeymoon in the later 1880s. Her gaze is out at the landscape, not toward us. We use her gaze as a vehicle, ourselves, to contemplate past her, the sky, the trees, and the water. Above her head is this spectacular sunset painted in dissonant colors, colors you don't often see registered next to one another in a canvas, and painted explosively. We also notice a kind of a post-impressionist or almost neo-impressionist touch on the surface of the water around her as Gallen-Kallela is honoring this woman, her moment in nature, the moment of the setting sun, the luminosity of the sky over Finland, and then this modern touch that signals that this is about the past, about landscape and place, but also very much about the moment, about new radical vocabularies that began to be adapted by these artists at this moment to suggest their modernity. One of the stars of the 1912 exhibition was the Danish painter Vilhelm Hammershøi. Hammershøi had a large number of works in the exhibition, and he was particularly noted for the peculiar silence and austerity of his works, and for the incredible delicacy with which he registered light effects, particularly within interior spaces. I wanted to focus on this painting, which is by Vilhelm Hammershøi, which is actually a portrait of Hammershøi's wife, Ida Ilsted, posed in one of their apartments in the city of Copenhagen at the turn of the century. It is about light, reflecting off of surfaces, refracting through glass. It's about the silence of the interior. It's about architecture and the ways in which architectural spaces create a sense of mood. The woman who stands within this environment herself is just as silent and static as any of the other objects that are shown. The door frames, the big stove in the background, the desk in the front, and of course the little cylindrical vase, which also echoes the cylindrical figure of the woman standing there. This painting is by Edvard Munch. It's entitled Girl Under an Apple Tree. It dates from 1904. And it's probably the last thing that many Americans expect to see coming out of the paintbrush of Edvard Munch. Munch is known for his painting The Scream, primarily, and for paintings of psychological extremists that he rendered in the 1890s. Edvard Munch is one of the best-known artists worldwide from the turn of the 20th century, and it's remarkable that in this 1912 exhibition of Scandinavian art, North American audiences saw Munch's painting for the very first time. Girl Under an Apple Tree represents a young girl, a kind of a changeling, in a kind of a schoolgirl uniform, wearing her little hat, very prim and proper, standing, holding some sheaves of wheat next to a flowering plant and under this explosive tree in, actually, we know, the coastal landscape of southern Norway. It's an example of early expressionism in Scandinavia or anywhere in Europe. The young girl is absolutely rigid and silent, staring directly at us, but the landscape around her is absolutely alive because of the agency of Edvard Munch's brush. And it's precisely this notion of a vitalized nature, this sense of place that is alive, that Scandinavian art offered to Americans as a possibility to think about the vitality of our own place and our own time in 1912. One of the things that critics said about the 1912 exhibition was that the Danish art section at the time looked austere and humble. The Norwegians were called the wild men of the north because of the kind of expressive brushstroke that I just showed you in Munch's painting. And the Swedes were understood to be the most nationalistic of the group. Prince Eugen was a member of the Swedish royal family and one of the foundational members of the sort of an 1880s generation of artists in Sweden who were committed to painting their landscape, their sky, their forests, their rocks as a way of articulating their love for country. And one of the reasons why I particularly love this painting, which was in the original 1912 exhibition, is because it does two things simultaneously. On the one hand, Prince Eugen is registering this deep, silent wilderness in the foreground of the lower half of the composition. And at the same time, there's a sky which is painted in a series of staccato brushstrokes in order to express the intense luminosity and the strangeness and ephemerality of the summer night. So the permanence of the landscape, its depth, its darkness, its mystery, and the glory of the sky taken together is a kind of a symbol of the nation. On the one hand, permanent, and on the other hand, glorying in the evanescence of its summer nights, a symbol of the North. The last painting I'd like to point out is by an Icelandic painter named Ásgrímur Jónsson. It's a spectacular panorama. It was painted by this artist to suggest the grandiosity, the glory, and strangeness of the Icelandic landscape. These vast tracts under a kind of a glowering sky that contains a world of the miniature. Despite the panoramic nature of this landscape, when you look really closely, you'll find two tiny little sheep grazing within this bowl. And once you register the size of those sheep, insect-like in this landscape, you realize the magnificence of the place. It's for this reason that I wanted to end our little talk with this landscape. It encapsulates so much about the 1912 show that was appealing to the American audiences and that represents a kind of a sense of place and space and experimental touch that was central to Nordic painting of this period. The sort of collusion between a modern vocabulary and a sense of ancient rhythms of the land. This partnership between landscape, light, and the artist's individual sensibility, and then deployment of a modern touch, is what galvanized audiences in 1912, and that we hope to be able to articulate through our displays of landscapes, of interior scenes, of figurative representations. And in the end, this exhibition in 1912 was one that excited critics, but also excited artists. And there's a kind of legacy in the works of the Group of Seven in Canada, in the works of Marston Hartley, in the works of Charles Birchfield, and in the works of Edward Hopper, all artists who may or may not have intersected with this exhibition, but whose echoes of space and place and touch continue forward into the 20th century.
I hope you've enjoyed your look at Luminous Modernism, Scandinavian Art Comes to America. This is the third of 3 centennial exhibitions which the ASF presented during the past year. All 3 underscored the ongoing commitment of the ASF to furthering international understanding through educational and cultural exchange. All 3 were presented in these galleries, which are a wonderful venue for exhibitions, and we have a rich schedule ahead of us. We also present on an ongoing basis films, lectures, children's events, concerts, and a variety of other programs, all intended to bring America closer to the Nordic countries. We hope you'll visit often. Thank you.